Ben. I'm going to be doing a lecture here. It's going to be about the philosophy as a discipline, how the main key branches compare and contrast with Buddhism. I'm going to be taking a look at how that works and explaining what is the meaning of metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, logic, aesthetics, and political philosophy. Let's zoom into the knowledge graph. Thank you very much for Kinnevy's company for helping me to do this. Particularly Alex Law has been helping me a lot. People don't always know the meaning of those words, things like epistemology and ontology and those kind of things. So I've broken them down into their main ideas and some of the things that they cover, which people will recognize more. When philosophers are dealing, and that also covers psychologists, meditators, spiritual people of all different natures. Everyone may have thoughts on these different subjects about equality, karma, nature of art, ethical theories, and about time, the use of it, space, about moral psychology, about beauty and aesthetics, how ethics are applied. So these come out in our lives all the time. Those aren't the only things. Let's go down a little bit and have a look down there. Skepticism, reasoning, formal logic, informal fallacies and rights, skepticism, freedom, identity. All these things come under today's subject. So we're going to be looking at those one by one, going through Westerners, what they've said about that and based their quotes and main reputation on, and how it contrasts with Buddhism. Seen the main kind of ideas. These are the categories that they come from and they all belong to. Logic, aesthetics, metaphysics, ethics, Buddhist philosophy, political philosophy, and epistemology. So the first thing we're going to have a look at is metaphysics. This is how they connect to those other smaller ideas that link all in under these umbrella headings. If we pull out of it, if we see, for example, metaphysics has to do with the nature of existence, identity, causality, time is linked to that, and also space. So this one here, metaphysics. If we just center on that one and see the ones that revolve from that. So these are the core subjects, and these are some of the ideas and topics and subheadings that come into it. Right in with metaphysics, and starting with Aristotle. So metaphysics about the nature of existence. If we just center to Aristotle here, you'll see he's connected, and here we have him taking interest in several subjects: equality, informal fallacies, formal logic, morality and moral philosophy, as well as the nature of existence. And that's what we are primarily focusing on. So equality, informal fallacies, formal logic, morality and moral philosophy, nature of existence. And we will be looking also at that. A quote of his: "All men by nature desire to know." under the heading of Metaphysics. Take a look at Plato, also connected with the field of metaphysics. And you see also why these people's minds are considered great, because of the scope and the difficulty of the topics that they mentally wrestled with to understand and bring into society. So Plato, with his Republic, the nature of the ideal society. He has strong thoughts about the nature of art, mathematics, deductive reasoning. A quote from him, which says a lot about his philosophy, that the forms are the causes of all things, to Parmenides. So this can be explained if you consider a uncarved natural rock, and that in the mind, the person conceives a perfect sphere. And by design and intention, they then hone that craggy, sharp, gnarled rock into a perfect sphere. That the object in the mind, the sphere, governed the outcome of the rock through the effort of the human sculptor. That would be a sensible explanation of his use of that kind of philosophy. The next area of metaphysics we're going to be looking at is identity. And one of the key people who focused in on this was John Locke. And if we can just rotate him. So also topics as well as identity he was interested in are freedom, rights, identity, acquisition of knowledge is a little bit higher up on the screen. And that shows you the kind of range of interest. Let's put him back in his context and view with the others. So John Locke, and quote from him, he proposed also the concept of tabula rasa, which is a blank slate, meaning that people are born a blank slate. This was a very influential idea. And he said that, let us then suppose the mind to be, as we say, white paper, void of all characters. And that's from an essay concerning human understanding. This is a very influential and controversial concept that was taken up by others such as Sigmund Freud, and therefore it's anti-karma, and it's also anti-intelligent design and God design ideas that people are just simply born totally blank, and then everything is impressed upon it by influence and society, parents, and that's how people turn out the way they are. Another person occupied in a similar area of inquiry and influence is Thomas Hobbes. Very interested in the subject of rights, interested in the subject of freedom, identity. Those are the three links we see there. So we're in a political zone, political philosophy. However, Thomas Hobbes, just because he was dealing with those subjects, we shouldn't assume he was a great advocate for them, quite the opposite. He famously stated, the life of man is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. In Leviathan, he had a very negative view. Other people came along who countered this sort of influence, which led towards a very authoritarian and heavy use of controlling force and suspicion of human nature. Thomas Hobbes. On the subject of causality, one of the metaphysical subjects, being nature of existence, identity, causality. We have also David Hume here. And let's take a look at his areas: skepticism, justification of beliefs, and if we pull out a little bit, we also see this one, metaethics. What's that? When you're looking at questions such as what is the nature of moral statements? Are they expressions of personal preferences, objective facts, or something else? Or are moral truths objective or subjective? Do moral principles actually exist independently of human beliefs and preferences? Or how do we know or understand moral concepts? Do moral judgments rely on what? Reason, on emotion, on intuition, or something else? And then what is the relationship between morality and other domains, such as religion, or law, or social norms? So, David Hume. In this case, we're looking at his ideas of causality. He questioned the concept of causality, stating, custom, then, is the great guide of human life in an inquiry concerning human understanding. So again, we get a contrast with the Buddha, who talked about how custom was just custom. It's not a great guide, and it's often faulty, for example. Following on from Hume, Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz also had ideas about causality, and his was called the principle of sufficient reason. And that is that an idea where maybe we take for granted now, which is that nothing happens without a reason. Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. So we can see how this fits in with our subject of metaphysics. This aligns with the Buddha's rationalism and his understandings of karma and causality and the dependent origination, that things that aren't happening out of God's will, they're not happening out of fortuitous chance, they're not happening out of astrological influences, they are happening because of causes. Where there are causes, there are conditions, and those conditions become new causes for new conditions, and ad infinitum, that goes on and on. Leibniz. Causality is a critical topic. What causes things to happen? And there's also that question there, are we talking about things happening? Planets? Harvests? Diseases? Or are we talking about internal human stress, anxiety, tooth decay? Or what are we talking about? So, and the transition of Enlightenment thinking from very magical thinking, very alchemical thinking, to scientific thinking. Now we're looking at causality. Bertrand Russell. So his his metaphysical look at causality parallels in some ways with the Buddha's dependent origination. Bertrand Russell's ideas on causality, he rejected the traditional notions of causality as just a necessary connection between events. His approach to causality is rooted in Western philosophy and logic, particularly influenced by thinkers like David Hume and Immanuel Kant. He focused on logical analysis, empirical observation to understand causality, and often questioned traditional metaphysical explanations. Russell's views on causality tend to emphasize linear cause and effect relationships, probabilistic thinking, and a rejection of supernatural or metaphysical claims. So it's sounding like it's more in line with behaviorism from Skinner than Buddha. So it's in contrast to metaphysical and supernatural explanations. Russell advocates for a naturalistic understanding of causality rooted in empirical evidence and logical reasoning. And that approach sought to demystify causal phenomena and attribute them to comprehensible and observable factors rather than invoking mystical or untestable explanations. Overall, Russell's ideas on causality reflect his commitment to empiricism, rationalism, and a naturalistic worldview, which are core central tenets of modern scientific inquiry.